Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Warrior podcast. I'm Ebony, and I'm here as your wellness facilitator. I'm going to be sharing my experiences in managing Hashimoto's disease. I really hope that it'll help you on your personal journey. Keep in mind, however, this does not substitute for medical advice. It is only for your information and motivational purposes only. Now, let's get started. Hi, friends! I'm really excited to finish up talking about our macros. Now, macronutrients are composed of carbohydrates, fat, and protein. And today we're going to talk about protein. And it is one of my favorite things to consume because I love food, and not a day goes by where I'm not either thinking about a new recipe or trying out something else, or if I'm in a meeting and I'm trying to figure out when I'm going to get my next meal. So, one of the things that's very important for those of us that have thyroid diseases is making sure that we have a healthy balance of protein, carb, and fat. So, one of the things that you always want to consider, particularly because there's always some new diet or some new plan coming out, and one of the things that I really want to caution you guys about is just making sure that you understand the implications of that diet or that new plan that's out. And when in doubt, talk to your doctor about it. Because for some of us that might do a low carb, high fat, high protein diet, that might not be good for us. Or if you do a keto diet and you have diabetes, that might not be a good mix for you either. It might work initially to drop the weight, but you have to monitor your body so that you don't get what's called ketoacidosis, because that's just not a fun thing to have to experience. So to start, I want to talk to you a little bit about how I structure my meals. And one of the things that I do is I try to make sure that I have a clean protein, whether it's plant-based or animal protein. I try to make sure I have a more complex carb, and then I try to include some type of healthy fat. When I'm shopping, I try very, very hard to buy organic when possible. And when it comes to buying my animal protein, I also try really hard to get my meat from a local farmer, because for the most part, they try really hard not to use pesticides and antibiotics, and they let their animals roam free. Now, if you're on the vegan and vegetarian boat, you want to make sure that your protein is clean, and that if you can, that you can buy organic. And you also want to make sure that you're keeping your sodium levels low, especially if you buy canned sources of protein. And we'll get into that in a little while. But one of the things that I've learned as a result to switching over to buying the clean proteins and the organic fruits and vegetables for my carbs or my fat, I feel better. And I'm very sensitive to pesticides, so I always have to make sure that I'm washing my fruits and vegetables really good with a nice clean fruit and vegetable wash, or I just soak it in vinegar and water. And it's really interesting because you'll notice that when you do wash your produce with the vinegar and water, you'll see the residue at the bottom of the sink or the pan. So, you just want to be careful, and you don't want that type of stuff going into your body. So always be careful, and always just monitor what you have. If when you get home, if it's easy for you to just wash your produce and stick it in a keeper bag, as I call them, they have produce bags to kind of keep your fruits and vegetables fresh longer, or containers. I'll make sure that I put a link in the show notes for those particular items so that you can see what I'm talking about. My husband has osteoarthritis, and we actually were fortunate enough to do stem cell treatment on his left hip. And when in doubt, I researched because I knew that we were going to have to harvest the stem cells or the bone marrow from his hips. And I wanted to make sure I knew how to kickstart his body into producing all of the things that he needed in order to get the best sample for this particular procedure. And what I ended up doing was I tried to have very, very clean protein the week prior to his procedure. And then I weaned him off of that slowly and introduced him to more plant-based foods. And we would continue that for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then I slowly introduced him back into a high protein, high fat, low carb diet leading up to when they had to extract the cells. And his samples were absolutely positively beautiful. And I'm a former researcher and I love geeking out to that stuff because it was just beautiful. And the doctor was excited and happy. He's like, oh my word, like this is beautiful. I'm so proud of you. What did you do? So I just talked to him about what I did and how, from the research that I'd done, what was going to be good for harvesting the cells and what would be bad. And we just cut all that out. And it was just such a rewarding experience. And that is why I'm so happy that I'm choosing to change the way that I think about food and change the way that I approach how I plan my meals so that I can feel better and my husband feels better. And it's really, really important for me to make sure that we're doing what we have to do to feed and fuel our bodies. So back to protein. When you're someone that has a thyroid disease, you have to be very careful because if you decide to go on some of these diets and you're not getting enough protein, your body is going to come under stress. And when your body becomes stressed, it will very, very quickly impact your thyroid gland. So you have to make sure that you're balancing what comes into your body. And I also want to mention that you also want to be careful. And this is why I suggested to ease your way into changing the foods that you eat in terms of making sure you have clean sources of protein or that you're really being conscious about the foods that you eat, because we learned about saturated and unsaturated fat. And when you get food from the grocery store, let's just talk about animal protein for just a second. Sure, it's great. You're looking at your packaging. You have boneless, skinless chicken. But when you look at the label on that, you might see that there's some type of salt mixture that was used to plump your chicken. You have to be careful about that because one of the things that I've learned is the American Heart Association recommends about a teaspoon or 2,300 milligrams of salt in our diet. And when you look at that, you're like, a teaspoon? What? I eat way more than that on my food. So I tried to get really educated on that. And I started looking at my packaging of when I get my animal protein. And then when I'm doing my vegetable weeks, I'm looking at the packaging of, okay, if I get a can of chickpeas, how much sodium is in this? You'd be surprised that once you start looking at these packages, you're like, whoa, I had no idea. So you have to be very, very careful about that. So with that said, I hope you guys have a fantastic day and I will talk to you soon. Okay, thyroid warriors, get out there and take things one step at a time. Remember, be great, reflect on your triumphs, and as always, be well. Take care.